Shreveport Police Chief Ben Raymond. Hey, Chief Ben, welcome back to Keel. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you.
We had Fire Chief Scott Wolverton on, and the first question we asked him, we can throw at you. All of this, the quarantine, the rules, the stay-at-home, etc., how is that affecting the day-to-day operation of the Shreveport Police Department? What are you guys doing?
Well, I think it's just making it a little more, I don't want to say, I guess, stressful on officers. Obviously, in addition to all the safety hazards that the guys and gals already face, now they have to also be aware of possible exposure to COVID-19. So they're having to do their jobs wearing masks and gloves and face shields and sometimes gowns, and really kind of put more effort and thought into every situation they're going into. So these calls we go to, they're already dangerous in nature, have now become even more so.
That was what I was going to ask. Theirs is a job. Yours is a job of very often physical confrontation. At some point, man, you guys have just got to set the coronavirus thing aside and do their job, don't they?
They do, and that's what makes it difficult. We don't have the ability to really don all the safety gear that maybe a medical worker could don. So, for example, a gown. It's very difficult for an officer to wear a gown because then they can't access some of their life-saving equipment on their rig belt or on their vest. And so they're having to wear, limited but appropriate amounts of PPE, which for us is primarily gloves and a face mask and safety goggles. But certainly they've involved in incidents in which some of those things may fall off or rip off or get torn off, and then you just kind of continue through, till that situation's under control.
Chief, you're getting some criticism for shutting down tennis courts. I told you we wanted to talk to you about that today. Was this your decision, joint decision? How did that happen yesterday that you sent officers to Southern Trace and Piermont Oaks?
So, as you know, the city made the decision to shut down city facilities, including tennis courts, probably 3 weeks ago, I believe March 23rd, thereabouts. In the last week or so, we've received an increase in complaints at some of the private facilities that were still allowing tennis. And my stay-at-home group sent emails to me probably Wednesday this week and said, look, we need some direction here. You're not allowed to play tennis at city facilities. We're allowing it at private facilities, and it's causing problems because.
What kind of problems? What do you mean?
Well, I guess it's somewhat of a fairness issue. So if we believe that it's not safe to play tennis at this time at a city court, how is it any more safe to play tennis at this time at a private court? And the answer is it's not. So if the decision is made that tennis is not a safe activity to be played during the COVID-19 pandemic, then logically it's not any safer at a private facility than it would be at a public facility.
Was that prompted by tennis pros who maybe at the city courts can't give lessons, but yet some other tennis pros are still able to give lessons? Was that part of it? And
I don't know who the specific complaints came from. I took about 2 days and reached out to several different sources before the decision was made. Ultimately, if you can Google it, the U.S. Tennis Association has asked tennis players to take, and I believe they worded it, a collective pause from playing tennis, and they cited some of the reasons. The sweat involved, the touching of the balls, the rackets, the nets, the courts, the benches, all the different ways that the virus can be spread. And so, again, anytime a decision is made, first thing that I ask myself and I ask all our officers to ask, is it legal, moral, and ethical? And what decisions will be legal, moral, and ethical? And in this case, closing down the tennis courts or leaving them open would have been a legal, moral, and ethical decision. The next thing you got to look at is, okay, what's logical? What's the best decision for the city as a whole, not any particular group of people or any particular person? And logically, we had shut down tennis to a large majority of the citizens at public facilities. So the logical thing to do, and what makes sense for the majority of our citizens, is also close the sport at the private facilities. If we deem that it's not safe during the pandemic, then it's not safe during the pandemic at any recreational area where you could play the sport.
Chief, is there any kind of warrant involved in that case, or do the officers go onto the facility and say, here's what we would like you to do? Walk us through the process, and we have heard from the folks at the different tennis clubs that they were very amicable and sort of wanted to work with the officers on the scene. What if they had not? What if they had said, "Hey, this is private property. You can't be here"?
That would have hopefully resulted in the call to me. Every measure we've been put in place, a large majority of these measures that 4 or 5 weeks ago would not have been illegal, that are now, we're treading lightly. We've got a specific group of people that have been working to the stay-at-home operation now for the last 4 weeks, and they're very well versed in what the governor's declarations are. And I have daily contact with the command staff answering these questions. But look, we're looking for cooperation. We have written one summons to a business in 4 or 5 weeks now for failing to comply with the governor's orders, and we've responded to several hundred complaints. So we are really looking for cooperation. We're not trying to take enforcement measures. And I spoke with one of the tennis clubs yesterday myself. Very cooperative, very amicable. I explained my position to them. Look, if we can all just hang in there for another couple of weeks, then I think we can start to hopefully get back to somewhat business as normal. We've come this far. We're seeing a downturn in those numbers of cases. This is not the time to get upset about some of those things we're all having to give up in our personal lives for the betterment of the city and the people as a whole.
I have a tennis court in my subdivision. Robert has tennis courts in his subdivision. What do you do about those areas where, there's public courts on private property? Are those considered, should those folks shut them down too?
Unless you have a tennis court within, confined within your residence, some people have tennis courts in their backyards, for example, then yeah, you should shut them down. It's just like a gym facility. If I've got workout equipment in my garage, then I can work out. But if I've got to go to a public facility where other people use that equipment, then no, I should not be working out. And look, we're not driving around looking for tennis courts and looking for people playing tennis. When we get a complaint, we respond to it. As I've been sitting here talking to you, I've got 2 complaints, and I haven't read both of them, through our Crime Stoppers tip line that could be in reference to an alleged violation of the governor's declaration. So we're not being proactive in many of these instances. We're being reactive. People are calling in, giving us complaints and saying, "Hey, I have a problem with this," and we're out investigating them.
Chief, I'm looking forward to being able to go sit by my swimming pool here pretty soon. Is that something that you're looking at now, that maybe those shouldn't open up?
I haven't had any discussion about swimming pools. Now, I certainly don't expect that any of the city-owned swimming pools will be operating within the next few weeks. But no, we haven't had any discussion about limiting swimming pools. And again, I'm a citizen like everybody else. I would like to get back to not limiting anything. I like to go to the gym and haven't been in 5 weeks. So this is affecting me as much as anybody else. But we've got to do what's right and what's good for the city as a whole. And at this point, it does mean we're going to have to limit some of our recreational activities. But swimming has not been on that list.
Got a text just now from a state representative who asked me to ask you if you considered private property rights when you made this decision.
Yes, we did consider private property rights. And again, if you're going to look at it from a legal perspective, I would ask a person to look at Louisiana 14329.6, I believe, is the statute, and it talks specifically about emergency declarations made by the governor, and it goes in to say that the chief law enforcement officer can do a number of things in order to protect life and property to bring the certain emergency situation under control, and that includes designating specific zones within the occupancy and use of buildings, ingress and regress of vehicles and persons to be prohibited or regulated, and regulating the close of places of amusement and assembly. Now, and again, we're treading lightly on private property rights. So you posed a question to me earlier in this conversation. What if they would have said, "No, we're not doing it"? Well, then our officers would have backed out, reported to me, and we would have determined the best way to address that. We're not looking for confrontation, and we're not looking for a reason to make somebody a criminal that's not a criminal.
Gotcha. Shreveport Police Chief Ben Raymond, thanks for your time this morning, always being candid.
Great stuff, Chief. Thank you very much for your time, as always.